this will tell us the date that we're going to use to harvest, and then we can use this as our checklist and make sure that everything that we have here, our toilets and our hand washing facilities, are available and cleanly, properly stocked. All of the criteria that meets our pre-harvest checklist is completed, and then we can have that as our documentation. So that's pretty important. Sometimes when you know, we're in the midst of things, it's great just to have a printed checklist, not something like on Google spreadsheets. You know, you need something as far as a paper copy so that you can just check, sign off on it, date it, and go. So before we harvest, we wash our hands.
Practices, if you come up and look at the hand wash station, you don't have to have high tech or even the running water. They have a cooler with a lever that allows the water to free flow. They've got their soap and single-use paper towels. A common mistake I see is rags, so that is all fantastic.
And then we pick up our containers and we clean these. We have a log, and so we clean these twice a week. We have a 3-strand electric fence here that goes all the way around the orchard, and it also goes all the way around the garden. We also have chicken wire at the bottom to keep out rabbits and turtles, and then and that works pretty well. Occasionally, you know, we haven't seen anything this year, so the rabbits aren't really a problem for us, and that's how we control. Our garden, we grow on a little over a ½ acre, and I'm going to have Don talk about our irrigation system.
This is our point of irrigation, so we have one well that is designated specifically for our farming, which includes a portion of it waters the animals. This portion is specifically for watering our garden. And it comes up to this point where we have 2 systems. One is for the main high tunnel where we have mostly tomatoes and cucumbers and greens. The other side is mostly for everything else. It includes the smaller high tunnel and what's outside. Also included with this is a fertigation system. It meters a certain parts per million of fertilizer into our drip irrigation system, and it's protected with a backflow preventer going through the fertigation system.
So one of your considerations with your well, depth can be important, especially if you're near livestock. If it's a shared source, always have backflow prevention, especially if you're running any type of synthetic, be it a fertilizer or anything else, through the feed. And then we talked about the potable hoses for distribution through. And do you want to talk about your water testing a little bit?
So we tested our water with the K-State Research Center and used their option of free water testing. And so we collect it in the sample bottles and then send it to K-State, and they test it for us up to 3 times a year. And last year we had, in October, we tested our water and it came back within normal limits.
And right now we're actually, any grower that wants to get tested however many times, we'll test it. Originally it was up to 10 samples you could do, but we'll do it as many times as you want to send it in.
How often do you recommend that, Cal?
It would depend on the water source, if you're using surface or well. If you're doing a well, it's a good idea that first year to pull probably 4 samples, and then after that just once a year. It's different if you're going to be covering the produce safety rule versus you're just following good agricultural practices. Another thing I'll point out with the farm too is you'll see all the measures they take for prevention of wildlife with fencing and other aspects. It's important on the produce safety side because as soon as feces gets near crop, it's bad for your consumers. But also, it's, all of you know, it's hard to be a farmer. Nothing's worse than planting and growing a beautiful crop and then Bambi coming in and eating your stuff. And In those cases, reach out to Extension, work with the wildlife folks to help you save your crops.
Growing inside our high tunnels, as you can see, we have multiple rows, and there are actually 2 rows in each row. So they're planted a little closer together, but they're also, we vine them and prune them so that they grow off of a single vine. So you can see here we have multiple vines, but they're a single plant. And as they grow, we provide a string to vine them from, add support, and we clip them. And about every 3rd cluster, we clip them. Just adds extra support. We grow under plastic mulch, which actually helps us conserve water. We drip irrigate everything, so that plastic will actually conserve the water from evaporating out of the soil, so the plants will utilize the water rather than evaporating. We prune off the lower leaves, which provides air circulation around the plants and controls diseases, fungal diseases.
The safety side, what you'd want to focus on here is when you're using drip to do the tomatoes, the water's not going to be touching the edible portion of the plant. It's a different story when you get to the root crops and the lettuces. So the question is, have you tested your water source and you know the quality of it? K-State is offering water testing for growers for free, so definitely take advantage of that. And on the wildlife side, when they mentioned birds getting in, the question is, what's your reaction when a bird does get in? How do you get it out? And then what do you do if it starts eating on the plant, and if it lands on the plant and leaves you a nice feces presence, what would you do in response to that?
The birds are a little sometimes difficult to usher out, but eventually, I mean, within 10 or 15 minutes, the birds are pretty much gone and they don't come back in. They realize after smacking their heads on the roofs a few times, they're gone. As far as leaving its presence on the plants, we would identify that area, remove the portion of the plant that has the feces on it. If it's on the ground, it would be probably marked, flagged a certain way, so we knew that that's an area we'd work around.
I always encourage removal of feces. I'm not a fan of leave or bury.
This is a Roma eggplant. It's an heirloom, different from its counterpart. Just a different color. Some people are like, what is that? Makes a different color on your plate. As we're eating colors on it off of our plate. And this is our Black Beauty eggplant. You know, that's one of our big things why we grow the way we grow, is because we like to teach people about their food system. We want to teach them different varieties of food, different ways to use it. That's been the core of our mission here. And so that's really important to us, and being able to send that email or to send that newsletter and give them a recipe and say, try this. It may be something you haven't ever tried before, but you may really like it. So our variety selection is very important to us because we like to maximize the small amount of acreage that we have here, square footage wise, and get the most for what we can grow. So.
High tunnels can present a problem with runoff. The surface area they take up naturally when it everything comes down, that all falls off to the side. If it's on a downhill slope, it runs away. If it's on the uphill slope, it wants to come back into the high tunnel. And it comes in floods. So we have, actually on each end of our high tunnel, we built raised beds on the upper side. This allows the water to come further away from the high tunnel. And then what it can't carry away, we've actually created waterways in our lawn, in our other areas, to kind of help carry that water away. But it all comes down where our compost pile is, which allows more moisture to kind of stay in our compost. So it's a
Dual purpose.
dual purpose.
Consider when you do your farm and your layout is knowing your local topography. You can see today the overcast and the rain, and they talked about having water issues at the tunnels. So here, the way the slope is going down towards the production areas, it's a starkly different situation if you have cattle or livestock outside your field than row crops. And another thing they're doing fantastic is you'll see the compost pile down towards the bottom of the slope, away from the production areas, with protection measures in place to safeguard it from wildlife and other things. Avoid the temptation of putting your compost pile in the middle of your field. It's logistically easier, but it takes your risks through the roof, especially if you're using manure base.
So they're
Is that specifically because of water and stuff, or?
mostly because of the water. The water that runs off of the farm ground, the row crop ground, inundates this area of our garden. So this naturally had from when it was a feedlot, they cleaned the feedlot, put the soil up against this side, which created a natural berm. That berm allows the water to flow around, away from the garden, mostly. There are times when it does run over this berm, and it does give us a little problem with erosion in the garden. And we also don't know what chemicals the row crop people put on their plants, so it kind of gives us a barrier from what might translocate from that.
The deal about this setup is when you're especially heavily soiled produce, there's no water pooling, no water accumulation, so you're washing down your produce single pass. You can scrub and clean this easily at the end. With the water system, just make sure you're using a potable water hose. You can get them at any major chain. It's what you basically hook up an RV at a campsite to keep the water potable from the source to here. You don't want to be using the cheap green garden hoses for that.
So this is our processing room. When we have greens, this is our 3-vat sink. So this is our green spinner, and we would place it in the green spinner, spin it out, which helps it get all of the excess water off of it, and it keeps a little bit longer. And then from there, we would bring it over to our counter here. These are our bags. We would put it in, bag it, label it, and then it goes directly into our cooler. We have a clipboard here with our log, and we actually have where we have watched the date, the time, the tools that we used, the method, if we cleaned or sanitized or both, and then the employees' initials that actually did the processing. We use sponges, and they're great because you can use them and then toss them. So each one of them is individually wrapped. We would get one out, wipe it down. Dawn dish soap is our bacterial soap that we use. Everything gets cleaned, and then our sponge goes in the trash, and we're ready for the next time. And we do that twice a week, if not more, because we harvest twice a week. We go out to CSAs twice a week, so we definitely do that process twice a week. So we have a traceability for our crops, and we use a handgun system, which is just a sticker that we attach to items that go out of here, so we know which area of the half acre our crops came from, like cucumbers. This is our traceability sticker, and then tomatoes, squash, okra, peppers, strawberries. Those are all very important. So we just use a Monarch, it's a hand labeling gun. They're pretty inexpensive, and you can change the location here, up here, and then the label comes out and you just stick it on your package.
It could run for a while.
And with cold storage, the thing you want to remember there is after all that effort, time, and money you spent growing a good crop, different commodities do better at different temperatures for your post-harvest and your shelf life. There are fact sheets and guides and tutorials on that. It's always beneficial to have a great relationship with Extension because we are here to help you in those regards.